A tourist's arrogance at Buckingham Palace turned into a shocking lesson about respect that no one would ever forget. This is a story that will make you think twice about crossing boundaries with the royal guard. Hey there. If you enjoy real life, stories about justice being served, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss out on our newest uploads. A crisp autumn morning painted the sky above Windsor Castle in brilliant shades of gold and amber. Dusubas' historic fortress stood proud against the horizon, its ancient stones bathed in the gentle rays of the early sun. The immaculately maintained grounds stretched out before the castle, where William Mitchell, a 28-year-old member of the Queen's Guard, stood at attention with unwavering discipline. Will, as his fellow guards knew him, cut an impressive figure. In his pristine scarlet tunic and towering bearskin hat, his polished brass buttons gleamed in the morning light, and the ceremonial sword at his side served as a symbol of centuries of tradition and honor. 6 years of service had earned him a reputation for exceptional discipline, even by the Royal Guard's rigorous standards. The morning air buzzed with excitement as tourists from around the world gathered in growing numbers. Cameras flashed and phones recorded as visitors captured memories of their brush with British royal tradition. The atmosphere was cheerful yet respectful, with most tourists maintaining a proper distance behind the marked boundaries. Will remained motionless, his dark eyes fixed forward, embodying the perfect balance of authority and ceremony that the Queen's Guard represented. His sword, a magnificent piece of military craftsmanship, rested in its scabbard, not merely a ceremonial ornament, but a testament to the serious nature of his duty. Among the growing crowd, tour guides shared historical facts about the castle and the guard's prestigious role. Children pointed in wonder at Will's impressive uniform, while parents explained the importance of maintaining respectful distances. The scene was a perfect example of how tourism and tradition could coexist harmoniously. That serenity was about to be shattered by Brandon Wright, a 35-year-old tourist from Seattle who approached the square with an air of entitled confidence that immediately set him apart from the other visitors. Wearing a graphic t-shirt with YOLO emblazoned across the chest, cargo shorts despite the autumn chill, and a backwards baseball cap, Brandon carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed rules were merely suggestions. "This is going straight to my followers," Brandon announced loudly to no one in particular, his phone already filming as he walked. He moved through the crowd, occasionally bumping into other tourists without apologizing. His friend Derek Anderson, trailing behind with an embarrassed expression, tried unsuccessfully to temper Brandon's growing excitement. "Dude, check out that sword," Brandon whistled, zooming his camera in on Will's ceremonial weapon. "Bet that's worth a fortune on eBay." The comment drew concerned glances from nearby tourists, including Emma Clark, a schoolteacher from Australia, who instinctively pulled her young students closer. The morning sun continued to climb higher, casting long shadows across the castle grounds as Brandon made his way closer to the front of the crowd. His voice grew louder with each step, his commentary becoming increasingly bold. "Hey, these guys aren't even real guards, right? It's all just for show, like Disney World." Will remained perfectly still, his training evident in every muscle. They didn't twitch despite the growing disturbance. His eyes stayed locked forward, even as Brandon's presence began to draw more attention from the crowd. David Wilson, a professional photographer capturing the morning scene, lowered his camera to watch the situation unfold with growing concern. "I bet I could make him move," Brandon declared to his growing social media audience, his phone still recording. "These guys are just actors. That sword probably isn't even real." Derek's attempts to pull his friend back were met with increasing resistance. The tension in the air began to shift from the usual tourist excitement to something more uncertain. Parents drew their children closer, and several visitors began backing away from Brandon, creating a visible gap between him and the rest of the crowd. The peaceful morning had transformed into something else entirely, a prelude to an incident that would soon go viral for all the wrong reasons. Sarah Cooper, clutching her son Oliver's hand tightly, whispered to nearby tourists, "Someone should call security." But before anyone could act, Brandon had already set his plan in motion, one that would lead to consequences he never anticipated. The historic grounds of Windsor Castle were about to become the stage for a dramatic lesson in respect, tradition, and the serious nature of a royal guard's duty. No one in the crowd could have predicted just how this seemingly typical tourist encounter would transform into one of the most shocking displays of justice they'd ever witness. The tension at Windsor Castle was about to reach its breaking point, and Brandon Wright's next move would shock everyone present. As Brandon edged closer to Will Mitchell's post, his friend Derek made one last desperate attempt to intervene. "Come on, man. Let's just take some normal photos and go," Derek pleaded, his face flushed with embarrassment. But Brandon was too focused on his phone's recording to listen. The crowd watched in disbelief as Brandon deliberately crossed the clearly marked boundary line. His swagger had evolved into an exaggerated strut, playing to his live social media audience. "Let's see what these props are made of," he announced, moving dangerously close to Will's position. The ceremonial sword, gleaming in the morning light, had become the focus of Brandon's increasingly reckless attention. Emma Clark, the Australian schoolteacher, quickly ushered her students away from the scene. "This isn't going to end well," she muttered to David Wilson, the photographer who had stopped taking pictures and was now recording Brandon's foolish display on his own phone. "Yo, my followers want to see this sword up close," Brandon declared, his phone held high as he circled Will like a shark. The guard remained perfectly still, but there was a subtle shift in his stance, a change so slight that only the most observant tourists noticed it. Will's years of training had prepared him for situations exactly like this, though few had ever dared to go as far as Brandon was about to. Sarah Cooper covered her young son Oliver's eyes as Brandon's behavior became more erratic. The tourist's confidence had evolved into complete disregard for both tradition and common sense. He began mimicking Will's stance, making exaggerated faces at his phone camera, completely oblivious to the growing murmurs of disapproval from the crowd. "I bet these swords aren't even sharp," Brandon laughed, leaning in uncomfortably close. To Will's side, "Probably just plastic props for the tourists." His hand reached out, fingers extending toward the ceremonial weapon that had been guarded with honor for generations. The next few seconds seemed to unfold in slow motion. Brandon's fingers had barely grazed the sword's handle when Will's training kicked in with precision that left the crowd gasping. In one fluid motion, Will pivoted, his right hand securing the sword, while his left arm created an impenetrable barrier between Brandon and the weapon. "Step back, sir!" Will's command cut through the morning air like a thunderclap, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of military discipline. The sudden movement and authoritative tone caused Brandon to stumble backward, his phone clattering. To the ground. But instead of retreating, Brandon's embarrassment transformed into foolish determination. "Oh, so you can move," he taunted, regaining his balance. "Come on, let me just hold it for a second. My followers will love this." What happened next would be replayed millions of times on social media within hours. As Brandon lunged forward, in a clumsy attempt to grab the sword, Will executed a series of defensive maneuvers that his fellow guards would later describe as textbook perfection. In less than 3 seconds, Brandon found himself face down on the cobblestones, his arms pinned behind his back, while Will maintained his grip on the ceremonial sword with his other hand. The crowd erupted in a mixture of gasps, applause, and the distinctive sounds of hundreds of phones recording simultaneously. Derek, Brandon's forgotten friend, had retreated into the crowd, pretending not to know the man now eating cobblestones. "That's assault!" Brandon shouted, his voice muffled, against the ground. "I'm an American citizen. You can't do this to me." Mark Reynolds, the head of castle security, arrived with his team moments later. "Actually, sir," he said, helping Brandon to his feet while simultaneously securing him in handcuffs, "attempting to steal from a member of Her Majesty's Guard is a serious criminal offense." The crowd's phones captured every moment as Brandon's bravado crumbled. His face, now red with a mixture of embarrassment and rage, contorted as he realized the gravity of his situation. "I wasn't really going to steal it," he protested weakly. "It was just for content." Lisa Turner, a witness who had been recording since Brandon first crossed the boundary, spoke up. "I've got the whole thing on video, officers. He clearly stated his intention to take the sword and sell it on eBay."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
As security led Brandon away, Will resumed his position with the same unwavering discipline he'd shown before the incident. The only evidence of the confrontation was a slight scuff on his otherwise immaculate boot polish. The crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Phones buzzed with notifications as videos of the incident began spreading across social media platforms. Hashtags like Windsor Justice and Guardian of Tradition started trending within minutes. David Wilson, the photographer who had captured the entire sequence, checked his footage with satisfaction. "Now that's what I call protecting the crown," he remarked to nearby tourists. "Did you see how he maintained control of the sword the entire time?" Young Oliver, who had wiggled free from his mother's protective grip just in time to see the takedown, tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Mum, is that what happens to all bad guys who don't follow the rules?" The incident had transformed from a tourist's foolish attempt at social media fame into a powerful lesson about respect, tradition, and consequences. As security officers took statements from witnesses, the crowd's attention remained fixed on Will, who stood as motionless as ever, the morning sun glinting off his sword, the same sword that would now become a symbol of authority respected around the world. The consequences of Brandon Wright's foolish attempt to steal a royal guard's sword were about to unfold in ways he never imagined. Within hours of the incident, Brandon found himself in a small, sterile interview room at the Windsor police station. His YOLO shirt was wrinkled, his backwards cap confiscated, and his social media dreams shattered. Officer Mark Reynolds sat across from him, reviewing the growing mountain of video evidence uploaded by dozens of witnesses. "Let's go through this one more time, Mr. Wright," Reynolds said, his tone carrying the weariness of someone who had dealt with too many tourists like Brandon. "You crossed a clearly marked boundary, harassed a member of the Queen's Guard, and attempted to steal a ceremonial sword that's not only a priceless historical artifact, but also crown property." Brandon slumped in his chair, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His phone had been seized as evidence, and his live stream had ended abruptly with his face planted firmly on the cobblestones. The footage was now circulating across every major social media platform, turning him into exactly the kind of viral sensation he'd hoped to become, just not in the way he'd planned. "I was just trying to create content," Brandon mumbled, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "I didn't think it was that serious. Those guards, they're just there for show, right?" Reynolds leaned forward, sliding a tablet across the table. On its screen was a detailed history of the Queen's Guard's ceremonial sword, including its historical significance and value. "This prop, as you called it, Mr. Wright, is worth more than most houses. It's also a symbol of authority that dates back centuries." Meanwhile, back at Windsor Castle, Will Mitchell had been relieved of his post for a scheduled break. In the guards' quarters, his colleagues were already watching the viral videos of his textbook response to the attempted theft. James Harrison, a fellow guard with 15 years of service, clapped Will on the shoulder. "Perfectly executed, mate," Harrison praised. "Haven't seen a takedown that clean since the 19 incident with that Russian oligarch." The other guards nodded in appreciation, knowing that Will's actions would likely be used in future training sessions. Outside, the crowd had swelled to twice its usual size. As word of the morning's excitement spread, tour guides had already incorporated the incident into their spiels, pointing out the exact spot where Brandon had learned his lesson about respecting British tradition. Emma Clark, the Australian teacher, had turned the incident into an impromptu lesson for her students about respect and consequences. "And that, children, is why we observe boundaries and respect cultural traditions," she explained, noting with satisfaction how attentively her usually restless students were listening. David Wilson's photographs of the incident had already been purchased by several major news outlets. His perfectly timed shots captured every moment of Will's defensive maneuver, from Brandon's foolish grab attempt to his graceless meeting with the cobblestones. Back at the police station, Brandon's situation was getting worse. Derek Anderson, his supposed friend, had given a statement distancing himself from the whole affair. "I tried to stop him," Derek insisted to the officers. "He's been like this the whole trip. Everything has to be content for his channel. Yesterday he tried to climb the gates at Buckingham Palace for a thumbnail. Lisa Turner's video evidence proved particularly damaging. Her footage clearly captured Brandon's statement about selling the sword on eBay, transforming his just a prank defense into something far more serious." The police had also discovered Brandon's previous social media posts, which showed a pattern of disrespecting historical sites for views and likes. Sarah Cooper had stayed behind with her son, Oliver, who had become fascinated by the guards' professionalism. "Mummy, I want to be a guard when I grow up," Oliver declared, standing as straight as his 7-year-old frame would allow. Sarah noticed how the other tourists smiled at her son's innocent admiration of true dignity and discipline. The incident had sparked a broader conversation about tourist behavior at historical sites. News channels picked up the story, running headlines like "Tourist's sword heist attempt foiled by quick-thinking guard" and "Social media stunt goes wrong at Windsor Castle." Comment sections filled with debates about respect, tradition, and the influence of social media on tourist behavior. As evening approached, Brandon received the news that would change his life. "Mr. Wright," Reynolds announced, returning to the interview room with a stack of papers. "The Crown Prosecution Service has decided to proceed with charges. Additionally, you're being placed on the UK's tourist watch list, which means you'll have significant difficulty entering the country in the future." Brandon's face fell as Reynolds continued listing the consequences. His passport had been confiscated, and he would have to appear in court before being allowed to leave the country. The potential fines could run into the tens of thousands of pounds, and there was even the possibility of jail time. "But what about my followers?" Brandon asked weakly, still somehow missing the point. "Can I at least post an explanation video?" Reynolds just shook his head, wondering how someone could remain so oblivious. "Mr. Wright, I suggest you start thinking less about your followers and more about your legal representation." The story's impact continued to grow. Will's commanding officer had received numerous letters praising the guards' professionalism and restraint. Tourism officials were already updating their visitor guidelines, using Brandon's attempted theft as a cautionary tale. That evening, as Will Mitchell returned home from his shift, he allowed himself a small smile. He had upheld centuries of tradition, protected a historical treasure, and taught a valuable lesson about respect, all without breaking character more than necessary. The day of Brandon Wright's court appearance arrived, and the world was about to witness the true price of disrespecting royal tradition. 3 weeks had passed since the attempted sword theft at Windsor Castle. The morning sun illuminated the historic courthouse as Brandon, now wearing a properly pressed suit instead of his YOLO shirt, climbed the stone steps with his hastily hired lawyer. Gone was the backwards cap and the social media swagger, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a nervousness that showed in every movement. Inside the courthouse, the gallery was packed with journalists, tourists, and even a few off-duty members of the Queen's Guard. Will Mitchell sat in his civilian clothes, his perfect posture making him instantly recognizable despite the absence of his ceremonial uniform. He had been called as a witness, though the overwhelming video evidence made his testimony almost unnecessary. Lisa Turner, whose viral video had become key evidence, sat near the front. Her footage had now reached over 50 million views across various platforms, spawning countless reaction videos, documentaries about royal protocol, and serious discussions about tourist behavior at historical sites. "All rise," the court officer announced as Judge Margaret Blackwood entered the courtroom. Her reputation for handling cases involving historical and cultural sites preceded her, and her expression suggested she had reviewed the evidence thoroughly. Brandon's lawyer, Philip Bennett, had spent weeks trying to build a defense around his client's cultural misunderstanding and social media influence. But as the prosecution presented their case, including Brandon's own live stream footage, previous social media posts showing similar disrespect at other historical sites, and statements from multiple witnesses, that defense began to crumble. Emma Clark, the Australian teacher, had submitted a written statement about the impact on her students. "My class witnessed firsthand the consequences of disrespecting tradition and authority," she wrote. "While the incident was unfortunate, it provided a powerful learning moment about cultural respect that these children will never forget." David Wilson's photographs were entered into evidence, the high-resolution images showing the exact moment. Brandon's hands made contact with the ceremonial sword. Each frame told the story of arrogance meeting justice, captured in crystal-clear detail. When Will Mitchell took the stand, his testimony was as precise and professional as his guard duty. He detailed the training guards receive for handling such situations, emphasizing that physical intervention is always a last resort. "Our primary duty is to protect the Crown's property and maintain the dignity of our position," he explained. Mr. Wright left no alternative through his escalating actions. Sarah Cooper's son, Oliver, who had been watching the proceedings with his mother, whispered loudly enough for nearby journalists to hear, "Mummy, the guard is still protecting us, even without his big hat." The comment brought subtle smiles to many faces in the courtroom, except Brandon's. As the evidence mounted, Brandon seemed to shrink in his chair. His social media accounts, once his pride and joy, had become his undoing. The prosecution played clips showing him planning the sword heist in his hotel room the night before, calling it the ultimate clickbait challenge. Derek Anderson's testimony proved particularly damaging. Brandon had been planning something big for days, he revealed. He kept talking about how many followers he'd get if he managed to touch the sword. I told him it was a bad idea, but he said, "Controversy creates cash." Judge Blackwood's voice cut through the courtroom as she prepared to deliver her verdict. "Mr. Wright," she began, her tone carrying centuries of British judicial gravity, "your actions represent more than just an attempted theft. They demonstrate a fundamental disrespect for our nation's heritage, traditions, and laws." The sentence, when it came, drew gasps from the gallery. Brandon was facing a substantial fine, a suspended jail sentence, and most devastatingly for his social media career, a complete ban from creating or appearing in any online content related to historical or cultural sites worldwide for 5 years. "Furthermore," Judge Blackwood continued, "you will be required to create and fund an educational program about respecting cultural heritage sites to be shown to tourists entering the United Kingdom. The irony of Brandon's content being used to prevent others from following his example was not lost on anyone in the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, Mark Reynolds addressed the waiting media. "This verdict sends a clear message," he stated. "The Queen's Guard are not street performers or social media props. They are highly trained military personnel protecting our nation's heritage." The impact of the case reached far beyond the courthouse steps. Tourism boards across Britain began implementing stricter guidelines for visitor behavior. Social media platforms added warning labels to videos, encouraging disrespect of historical sites. Brandon's case became a cautionary tale, taught in tourism management courses worldwide. Will Mitchell's handling of the incident had earned him a commendation, though he remained as humble as ever. When asked about his newfound fame, he simply stated, "I was doing my duty, as any member of the Queen's Guard would." Young Oliver Cooper had started a trend among children visiting Windsor Castle. Instead of trying to make the guards laugh or break character, they now stood at attention alongside them, mimicking their disciplined stance with serious faces. Guards had noticed this respectful change in behavior, and while they maintained their stoic expressions, many felt a sense of pride in this positive shift. The most unexpected outcome came from Brandon himself. During his final statement to the court, something appeared to have genuinely changed in him. "I've spent 3 weeks thinking about what I did," he said, his voice heavy with genuine regret. "I've realized that some things are worth more than views and likes. Some traditions deserve respect, not ridicule." The aftermath of Brandon Wright's attempted sword theft would change tourist behavior at historical sites in ways nobody expected. 6 months after the courthouse verdict, Windsor Castle had transformed into a model of respectful tourism. Brandon's educational video, now mandatory viewing for tourists entering the United Kingdom, played on screens throughout the visitor centre. His face, no longer smirking but seriously addressing the camera, warned others about the consequences of disrespecting historical traditions. "I lost everything for a few seconds of social media fame," Brandon's recorded message echoed through the visitor centre. "Don't make the same mistake I did. These sites, these traditions, they're not props for your content. They're living history that deserves our respect." Will Mitchell, still serving with the Queen's Guard, had noticed a dramatic change in tourist behavior. The endless attempts to provoke reactions had decreased significantly. Instead, visitors often mimicked his disciplined stance, taking photos from a respectful distance. His incident with Brandon had become part of the official training for new guards, teaching them how to maintain composure while ensuring security. Emma Clark, the Australian teacher who witnessed the original incident, had returned to Windsor Castle with a new group of students. "Look how everyone stays behind the line now," she pointed out to her class. "Remember the video I showed you about the American tourist? That's why we always respect boundaries and traditions." The impact extended far beyond Windsor Castle. David Wilson, whose photographs of the incident had gone viral, had been commissioned to create a photo series about the daily lives of the Queen's Guard. His images, showing their rigorous training and dedication, helped humanize the guards, while maintaining their dignified image. Lisa Turner's viral video had sparked a movement on social media platforms. The hashtag respectful tourism had gained momentum, with travelers sharing examples of appropriate behavior at historical sites worldwide. Her original footage had been incorporated into tourism education programs globally. Sarah Cooper and her son Oliver had become regular visitors to Windsor Castle. Oliver, still fascinated by the guards, had started a children's club called Junior Guards that taught young tourists about royal traditions and respectful behavior. The program had received official recognition from the castle administration. Meanwhile, Brandon Wright's life had taken an unexpected turn. After completing his court-mandated educational program, he had discovered a new purpose. "Getting knocked down on those cobblestones knocked some sense into me," he admitted in a recent interview. Rather than chasing social media fame, he now worked with tourism boards to promote responsible visitor behavior. Derek Anderson, Brandon's former friend, had reconnected with him after seeing the positive changes. "He's not the same person who tried to grab that sword," Derek observed. "That incident actually helped him grow up." Mark Reynolds, head of castle security, had implemented new training protocols based on the incident. Will Mitchell's response became our gold standard, he explained to a group of new security officers. "Firm, professional, and measured, exactly how we handle disruptive situations." The legal ramifications had created precedents that strengthened protection for historical sites. Judge Blackwood's verdict had been cited in similar cases across Europe, establishing stricter penalties for those who disrespected cultural heritage for social media attention. One sunny morning, almost exactly 6 months after the incident, an unexpected visitor arrived at Windsor Castle. Brandon Wright, now dressed respectfully in a suit and tie, had received special permission to deliver a personal apology to the Queen's Guard. Will Mitchell was on duty when Brandon approached, this time staying well behind the boundary line. "Officer Mitchell," Brandon began, his voice carrying genuine remorse, "I came to apologize in person. What I did was more than just foolish. It was disrespectful to you, to your position, and to everything you represent." The crowd of tourists watched in silence as Brandon spoke. Will maintained his professional stance, but those nearby noticed a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The moment was captured by David Wilson, who happened to be there documenting the castle's daily life. "That photograph," David would later say, "shows everything about how this story changed things. In one frame, you see the guard representing centuries of tradition, the reformed tourist showing genuine respect, and other visitors watching and learning." The incident had sparked lasting changes in tourist behavior worldwide. Historical sites reported significant decreases in disruptive incidents. Social media platforms had developed new guidelines for content featuring historical locations and ceremonial guards. Oliver Cooper's Junior Guards program had expanded to other historical sites across Britain. Children in miniature guard uniforms, without the ceremonial swords, of course, learned about history, tradition, and respect through play and education. The story's impact continued to ripple through society. Tourism schools now included the incident as a case study in their curriculum. Security firms studied Will Mitchell's response as an example of perfect conflict resolution. Social media influencers cited the incident when discussing responsible content creation. Brandon's educational video ended with a powerful message. Behind every uniform, every tradition, every boundary line, there's a reason, a history, a purpose. Respect isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding why they exist. As the sun set over Windsor Castle that evening, Will Mitchell stood at his post, as dignified as ever. A young American tourist approached the boundary line, stopped respectfully short, and gave a crisp salute. Will remained motionless, but those who knew him well might have noticed the slightest hint of appreciation in his eyes. The incident that began with an attempted theft had transformed into a powerful lesson about respect, tradition, and the true meaning of social media responsibility. It proved that sometimes the most valuable content isn't about breaking rules or pushing boundaries. It's about understanding and honoring them. The final chapter in this extraordinary tale reveals how one tourist mistake revolutionized historical site tourism forever. 1 year after Brandon Wright's attempted sword theft at Windsor Castle, tourism officials gathered for an international conference on heritage site protection. The main topic? The Windsor Protocol, a comprehensive set of guidelines inspired by the infamous incident that had transformed tourist behavior worldwide. Mark Reynolds, now promoted to Director of Royal Site Security, stood at the podium addressing representatives from historical sites across the globe. What began as a social media stunt, he explained, has evolved into a complete reformation of how we approach tourism security and visitor education. The conference hall displayed striking before and after statistics. Incidents of disruptive behavior at historical sites had dropped by 70% since implementing the new protocols. Will Mitchell, recently promoted to senior guard instructor, had been instrumental in developing new training procedures that were now being adopted internationally. The key, Will explained to the attentive audience, isn't just about enforcing rules. It's about helping visitors understand the living history they're experiencing. His presentation included footage from Brandon's incident, now used as a training tool for security personnel worldwide. Emma Clark, whose students had witnessed the original incident, had been invited to speak about educational tourism. Her classroom project about respectful tourism had grown into a nationwide program called Heritage Guardians, teaching young visitors about the importance of preserving historical sites. Children who understand the why behind the rules become our best advocates, Emma shared, showing videos of her students teaching other young tourists about proper behavior at historical sites. They're not just following guidelines, they're embracing the spirit of preservation. David Wilson's photographs from the incident had been transformed into a traveling exhibition titled Guardians of Tradition. The images told a powerful story of conflict, consequence, and ultimate redemption, drawing crowds at museums worldwide. Lisa Turner, whose viral video had sparked the initial social media firestorm, had launched a successful documentary series about historical site preservation. What started as a shocking moment captured on my phone, she reflected, became a catalyst for global change in how we approach cultural heritage. Sarah Cooper and Young Oliver's Junior Guards program had expanded internationally. Children in historical sites from Edinburgh Castle to the Palace of Versailles now participated in educational programs, teaching them about ceremonial guards and historical preservation. The most remarkable transformation, Sarah noted, has been in how children view these sites. They're no longer just tourist attractions, they're living links to our shared history. Brandon Wright himself had undergone perhaps the most surprising evolution. His court-mandated educational program had sparked a genuine passion for historical preservation. He now traveled to universities and tourism schools, sharing his story as a cautionary tale that somehow transformed into an inspirational journey. "I came to Windsor Castle seeking social media fame," Brandon told a group of tourism management students. "Instead, I found a calling. Sometimes your biggest mistake can lead to your greatest purpose." Derek Anderson, watching his former friend's transformation, had collaborated with Brandon on a documentary about responsible tourism. The Brandon Wright incident, as everyone calls it now, wasn't just about one tourist crossing a line. Derek explained. It became about redrawing the lines between entertainment and respect. The impact on social media had been equally profound. Major platforms had implemented new policies regarding content filmed at historical sites. The hashtag, respectful tourism, had evolved into a global movement, with millions of users sharing examples of responsible tourist behavior. Will Mitchell's role in the incident had earned him more than just a promotion. He had become a symbol of unwavering dedication to duty, inspiring a new generation of ceremonial guards. Applications to join the Queen's Guard had surged, with many candidates citing the incident as their inspiration. Officer Mitchell showed us that maintaining tradition isn't just about standing still, one recruit explained during training. It's about standing strong for what these traditions represent. The tourist landscape at Windsor Castle had transformed remarkably. Visitors now approached with a sense of reverence, understanding that they weren't just taking photos, they were participating in living history. Tour guides incorporated the incident into their narratives, using it to illustrate the deep significance of ceremonial traditions. Judge Blackwood's pioneering verdict had established legal precedents that protected historical sites worldwide. Courts across the globe now cited the Windsor case when dealing with issues of cultural site disruption. Oliver Cooper, now a year older and still devoted to his junior guards program, had received a special commendation from the castle administration. His child-led initiative had proven that respect for tradition could be taught through engagement rather than just enforcement. The guards aren't just statues, Oliver explained to a group of young visitors, showing wisdom beyond his years. They're protecting something bigger than the castle. They're protecting our history. As the international conference drew to a close, attendees witnessed something remarkable. Brandon Wright and Will Mitchell stood together at the podium, their unlikely partnership symbolizing the bridge between modern tourism and historical preservation. 1 year ago, I was the tourist who tried to steal a sword, Brandon admitted to the audience. Today, I'm working alongside the very people I disrespected to ensure others learn from my mistake. Will, out of his ceremonial uniform but maintaining his characteristic poise, added, "This incident proved that tradition and progress aren't enemies. They're partners in preserving our heritage for future generations." The conference concluded with the official adoption of the Windsor Protocol by heritage sites in 47 countries. The guidelines born from a moment of disrespect had evolved into a global standard for historical site preservation and tourism. As the sun set over Windsor Castle that evening, tourists gathered at the respectful distance that had become the new normal. Phones still captured photos and videos, but now they documented something different. Not attempts to provoke or disrupt, but moments of genuine appreciation for centuries of tradition. 2 years after the infamous sword incident, Windsor Castle hosted a special exhibition that would bring the story full circle in an unexpected way. The exhibition, titled Guardians and Guidelines: The Evolution of Heritage Tourism, occupied a newly renovated wing of the castle. At its center stood a striking display, the very ceremonial sword that Brandon Wright had attempted to steal, now protected behind crystal-clear security glass. Will Mitchell, recently appointed to oversee guard training across all royal residences, stood before a group of international journalists. His polished shoes and crisp civilian suit reflected the same impeccable standards he had maintained in his ceremonial uniform. "This sword," he explained, gesturing to the display, "has become more than just a ceremonial weapon. It's a symbol of how one moment can transform an entire industry." The assembled press corps nodded, many of them having covered the original incident that had gone viral worldwide. Emma Clark's Heritage Guardians program had become a mandatory part of school visits to historical sites across Europe. Her innovative approach to teaching respectful tourism had earned her numerous educational awards, and she had been invited to consult with UNESCO on youth engagement at World Heritage Sites. "When my students witnessed Brandon Wright's attempt to steal that sword," Emma recalled during her presentation at the exhibition opening, "I never imagined it would lead to this. We've taught over 1 million children about respectful tourism since then." David Wilson's photographs from the incident now lined the exhibition walls, telling the story chronologically. The final image, taken just that morning, showed Brandon Wright and Will Mitchell standing together beside the displayed sword, both men's expressions reflecting the gravity of how far things had come. Lisa Turner, whose viral video had started it all, had been commissioned to create a documentary series about the transformation of historical site tourism. The ripple effects are still spreading. she observed, setting up her camera for an interview with Mark Reynolds. Every week, we discover new ways this incident changed how people approach heritage sites. Sarah Cooper and Oliver's Jr. Guards program had become an international phenomenon. Oliver, now 9, had been invited to speak at the exhibition's opening ceremony. His passion for preserving tradition had inspired thousands of young tourists to become heritage ambassadors. In their own right, when I first saw the guard take down the tourist, Oliver addressed the crowd with remarkable poise, I thought it was like an action movie. Now I understand it was about something much more important, protecting our history. Brandon Wright, who had completed his court-mandated program long ago, continued his work voluntarily. He had become an unlikely advocate for historical preservation, his genuine transformation lending credibility to his message that resonated with young tourists. Standing here next to this sword, Brandon spoke at the exhibition, I feel both shame and gratitude. Shame for what I attempted, but gratitude for how that mistake led to positive change. Derek Anderson, who had distanced himself from Brandon during the incident, now worked alongside him in their tourism education initiatives. Sometimes, Derek reflected, the best friendships are forged through adversity and growth. Mark Reynolds presented shocking statistics during the exhibition. Disruptive incidents at historical sites had dropped by 85% worldwide since implementing the Windsor Protocol. The comprehensive guidelines had been translated into 27 languages and adopted by heritage sites across 6 continents. What we witnessed, Reynolds explained, wasn't just the prevention of theft, it was the birth of a new era in heritage tourism. His presentation included security footage from sites worldwide, showing tourists actively self-policing disruptive behavior. Judge Blackwood, who had delivered the verdict that set these changes in motion, attended the exhibition opening. Her precedent-setting decision had influenced heritage protection laws globally. The law must evolve to protect our heritage, she stated, but the real change comes from understanding, not just enforcement. The exhibition featured an interactive display where visitors could experience a virtual reality simulation of guard training. Will Mitchell had helped develop the program, ensuring it conveyed both the physical demands and the philosophical importance of the role. People often ask why we stand so still, Will explained to a group of fascinated tourists. This experience helps them understand that our stillness represents unwavering dedication to protecting our heritage. Social media platforms had created verified heritage site accounts, promoting responsible tourism through positive examples rather than viral stunts. The respectful tourism movement had evolved into a global network of heritage protection advocates. Emma's students, some of whom had witnessed the original incident, now served as youth ambassadors at historical sites. They understand something profound, Emma noted. Tradition isn't just about the past, it's about preserving values for the future. The exhibition's most powerful element was a time-lapse video showing the transformation of tourist behavior at Windsor Castle. The change was striking. From tourists attempting to provoke reactions to respectful observers appreciating the living history before them. This is what real influence looks like, Brandon told a group of aspiring social media creators. Not disrupting tradition for views, but inspiring others to preserve it. Oliver's junior guards had stationed themselves at various points throughout the exhibition, their miniature uniforms and serious expressions drawing smiles from visitors. They answered questions about protocol and tradition with surprising expertise. My son used to play at being a guard, Sarah shared with other parents. Now he's teaching real guards about connecting with young visitors. It's amazing how children can bridge the gap between tradition and modern tourism. The exhibition concluded with a ceremony honoring those who had transformed a potential tragedy into a triumph for heritage preservation. Will Mitchell and Brandon Wright, once adversaries, stood together as examples of how understanding can overcome ignorance. 2 years ago, I saw this sword as a prop for my content, Brandon admitted during the closing speech. Today, I see it as a bridge between past and present, teaching us that some traditions are worth preserving. As the exhibition opened to the public, tourists from around the world witnessed the power of transformed perspectives. The sword that had almost been stolen now stood as a symbol of heritage protection, its story teaching future generations about respect, tradition, and redemption. 3 years after the infamous sword incident, a special ceremony at Windsor Castle marked an unprecedented milestone in heritage tourism that no one could have predicted. The castle grounds buzzed with anticipation as dignitaries from around the world gathered for the inaugural Global Heritage Protection Summit. At its heart was the unveiling of the International Tourist Education Center, a state-of-the-art facility born from the aftermath of Brandon Wright's attempted sword theft. Will Mitchell, now Chief of Heritage Guard Training Programs, stood at attention in his ceremonial uniform. His presence commanded respect from the assembled crowd, which included tourism ministers, heritage site directors, and security experts from over 50 countries. What we're witnessing today, Mark Reynolds announced to the gathering, is the culmination of a journey that began with a single tourist's mistake and evolved into a global movement for heritage preservation. Emma Clark's Heritage Guardians program had become a model for educational tourism worldwide. Schools from as far as Japan and Australia had adopted her curriculum, creating a new generation of culturally conscious travelers. Education isn't just about telling people what not to do, Emma explained during her keynote speech. It's about helping them understand why preservation matters. When young people grasp that concept, they become our strongest allies in protecting heritage sites. David Wilson's photographic chronicle of the transformation had been published as a coffee table book titled The Guardian's Watch, A Journey from Disruption to Respect. The final chapter featured a striking series of images showing how tourist behavior had evolved at heritage sites worldwide. Lisa Turner, whose viral video had sparked the initial change, now headed the center's media department. We've moved beyond simply documenting incidents, she explained. We're creating content that inspires respectful tourism before visitors even arrive at these sites. Sarah Cooper and Oliver's Junior Guards had expanded into a global youth ambassador program. Oliver, now 10, had become the youngest ever recipient of the Royal Heritage Protection Medal for his role in transforming children's engagement with historical sites. When I started this program, I just wanted to be like the guards, Oliver addressed the summit attendees. Now I understand that being a guardian of history is about more than standing still. It's about moving others to care. Brandon Wright, once the face of tourist disrespect, had been invited as a keynote speaker. His journey from social media provocateur to heritage preservation advocate had become a case study in redemption and purpose. 3 years ago, I thought tradition was just for show, Brandon reflected during his speech. Today, I understand that these traditions are the threads that connect us to our shared history. Derek Anderson, who had documented Brandon's transformation, premiered a documentary titled From Viral to Virtuous, The Windsor Effect. The film tracked how one incident had sparked a global revolution in heritage tourism. The most powerful moment in filming, Derek shared, was watching Brandon train new heritage site guides. The man who once mocked tradition now dedicates his life to preserving it. Judge Blackwood, present for the ceremony, had seen her verdict's impact ripple through legal systems worldwide. Heritage protection laws now have real teeth, she noted, but more importantly, we're seeing a cultural shift in how people view historical sites. The new education center featured interactive exhibits designed to help visitors understand the significance of ceremonial traditions. Will Mitchell had personally overseen the creation of a guard training simulation that let tourists experience the discipline required for the role. Understanding breeds respect, Will explained as he demonstrated the simulation. When people realize the physical and mental dedication required, they stop seeing us as tourist attractions and start seeing us as guardians of tradition. The summit unveiled surprising statistics. Tourist satisfaction at heritage sites had actually increased since implementing stricter protocols. Visitors reported feeling more connected to history when experiencing it in an atmosphere of respect. Emma's original students, who had witnessed Brandon's attempted theft, now led tours at various historical sites. They've become ambassadors for respectful tourism, Emma beamed. Their first-hand experience of that day helps them connect with other young visitors. The social media landscape had transformed dramatically. Platforms now promoted heritage influencers who specialized in educational content about historical sites. The once popular trend of provoking guards for views had been replaced by appreciation posts highlighting historical significance. We've proved that responsible content can be just as engaging as provocative stunts, Brandon told a group of social media consultants. People are hungry for meaning, not just entertainment. Oliver's junior guards had become official partners with heritage sites worldwide. Their presence served as a bridge between young visitors and historical traditions, making preservation accessible to new generations. My son showed us that children don't need gimmicks to engage with history, Sarah explained. They need connection and purpose. The ceremony concluded with a powerful symbol. Will Mitchell and Brandon Wright together unveiling a new permanent exhibition about the incident that had changed everything. The display included the original sword, Brandon's YOLO shirt, and a timeline of how one mistake had transformed heritage tourism. This isn't just a story about what went wrong, Will addressed the crowd. It's a story about how we can make things right when we choose understanding over ignorance. As the sun set over Windsor Castle, tourists gathered at respectful distances, many wearing Heritage Guardian badges earned through the new education program. The atmosphere was different from 3 years ago, not just quiet, but genuinely reverent. 4 years after Brandon Wright's attempted sword theft, Windsor Castle became the center of a groundbreaking initiative that would redefine the relationship between tradition and modern tourism forever. The castle grounds hosted the first ever Heritage Protection Innovation Conference, where cutting-edge technology met centuries-old tradition. The event showcased how the infamous sword incident had sparked a technological revolution in heritage site management. Will Mitchell, now serving as International Director of Heritage Guard Operations, stood before a holographic display demonstrating the new Guardian's Eye security system. The technology, inspired by his encounter with Brandon, combined artificial intelligence with human insight to protect historical sites. Innovation doesn't mean abandoning tradition, Will explain to the assembled experts. It means finding new ways to preserve it. The system he showcased could predict potential security risks while maintaining the dignified atmosphere of historical sites. Emma Clark's Heritage Guardians program had evolved into a virtual reality platform, allowing students worldwide to experience historical sites through an educational lens. Her original classroom lesson about the sword incident had grown into a global digital curriculum, Technology helps us scale our impact, Emma demonstrated, guiding a group through a VR tour. Students in Tokyo can now learn about respectful tourism alongside peers in London, creating a global community of heritage protectors. David Wilson's photographs had been transformed into an augmented reality experience. Visitors could now stand where Brandon had faced Will, watching the incident unfold through their phones while learning about the positive changes it sparked. The AR experience lets people feel the weight of that moment, David explained. They understand it wasn't just about one tourist and one guard. It was about choosing between respect and spectacle. Lisa Turner's viral video had become part of a larger digital archive, documenting the transformation of tourist behavior. "We're creating a living history," she said, showing future generations how one incident changed everything. Sarah Cooper and Oliver had launched a mobile app for the Junior Guards program. Young visitors could earn digital badges for demonstrating knowledge of historical sites and respectful tourism practices. Kids today live in a digital world, Oliver, now 11, explained to conference attendees. But that doesn't mean they can't connect with history. Sometimes technology helps build that bridge. Brandon Wright, whose social media stunt had started it all, now headed a tech startup developing educational tools for heritage sites. His company's latest project used AI to create personalized tours that emphasize cultural respect and understanding. 4 years ago, I used technology to disrupt tradition, Brandon reflected. Now I use it to protect it. That's the real power of innovation. It can serve any purpose we choose. Derek Anderson had integrated blockchain technology into heritage. Site ticketing, creating a system that rewarded respectful tourist behavior with exclusive digital content and experiences. "We're gamifying good behavior," Derek explained, "but not in a way that diminishes the significance of these sites. It's about encouraging mindful tourism through modern incentives." Judge Blackwood, speaking via hologram from the royal courts of justice, praised how technology had strengthened heritage protection laws. Digital evidence and AI monitoring have made it easier to enforce respectful behavior while maintaining site dignity. Mark Reynolds demonstrated a new crowd management system that had reduced disruptive incidents by 95%. "The best security is invisible," he noted. "Technology helps us protect these sites without turning them into fortresses." The education center now featured interactive holograms of guards explaining their roles and the importance of tradition. Will Mitchell's likeness guided visitors through the significance of ceremonial duties, bringing history to life while maintaining proper distance and respect. "These holograms allow us to share our story without compromising our duties," Will explained. "Visitors learn about our role while we continue to perform it." Emma's students had become beta testers for new heritage protection technologies. Their feedback helped develop systems that appealed to younger generations while preserving historical dignity. The social media landscape had evolved further, with AI moderators helping platforms identify and prevent the promotion of disrespectful behavior at historical sites. The algorithms, trained on incidents like Brandon's, could distinguish between educational content and potential disruption. "Technology isn't the enemy of tradition," Brandon told a group of developers. "It's a tool that can either protect or threaten heritage. The choice lies in how we use it." Oliver's Junior Guards now used augmented reality badges that came to life when scanned, sharing stories about the history they helped protect. The digital elements enhanced rather than replaced the program's focus on personal interaction and respect. "The badges are cool," Oliver explained, "but they're just tools to help us share our message. The real magic happens when young people connect with history." The conference culminated in the launch of the Global Heritage Protection Network, a digital platform connecting heritage sites worldwide. The system, inspired by the Windsor incident, allowed sites to share best practices, security insights, and educational resources in real time. 4 years ago, a tourist tried to steal a sword for social media fame. We'll address the closing ceremony. Today, we use those same technologies to protect our heritage. That's not just innovation, that's evolution. As the conference ended, tourists explored Windsor Castle through their phones' AR features, learning about its history while maintaining respectful distances. The technology didn't compete with tradition, it complemented it. Want to see more? Stories about how technology and tradition can work together? Hit subscribe and the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Share your thoughts in the comments about how technology has changed your experience at historical sites. Remember, innovation should serve tradition, not replace. Until next time, 5 years after the infamous sword incident, Windsor Castle prepared to mark a historic milestone that would forever change how the world viewed heritage protection. The castle grounds hummed with activity as preparations were made for the 5th anniversary commemoration, now known globally as International Heritage Respect Day. The event would showcase the remarkable journey from a tourist's misguided attempt at social media fame to a worldwide movement for cultural preservation. Will Mitchell, recently appointed as the first Global Heritage Protection Ambassador, stood in his ceremonial uniform beside the very spot where he had confronted Brandon Wright 5 years earlier. The location now featured a subtle bronze marker, a reminder of how one moment could spark global change. 5 years ago, this spot represented conflict. Will addressed a group of international journalists. Today, it represents transformation, not just of one tourist or one site, but of how the world approaches cultural heritage. Emma Clark's Heritage Guardians program had expanded to over 100 countries. Her innovative approach to teaching respectful tourism had become part of standard school curricula worldwide. The program now reached millions of students annually. We don't just teach children about history, Emma explained during the anniversary ceremony. We help them become part of its preservation. Every student who completes our program understands they're not just tourists, they're guardians of our shared heritage. David Wilson's photographic documentation of the incident's impact had grown into a permanent exhibition at the British Museum. The power of respect showcased the evolution of tourist behavior at heritage sites worldwide, with the Windsor incident as its catalyst. Lisa Turner's viral video had been preserved in the British National Archives as a pivotal moment in heritage tourism history. Sometimes the most important historical artifacts are the ones that capture moments of change, she reflected. This video shows exactly when everything shifted. Sarah Cooper and Oliver, whose Junior Guards program had inspired a new generation of heritage protectors, were honored with the Queen's Award for Cultural Innovation. Oliver, now 12, had become the youngest person ever to receive this prestigious recognition. When I started Junior Guards, I just wanted to be like Will, Oliver told the assembled dignitaries. Now I understand that being a guardian of heritage means helping others understand why these traditions matter. Brandon Wright, whose attempted theft had started it all, stood alongside Will during the ceremony. Their unlikely friendship had become a powerful symbol of redemption and understanding. Brandon now served as the International Ambassador for Responsible Tourism. 5 years ago, I was the problem, Brandon addressed the crowd. Today, I'm part of the solution. My greatest achievement isn't in how many followers I have, but in how many minds I've helped change. Derek Anderson had produced a landmark documentary series titled The Guardian Effect, chronicling how the incident had transformed global tourism. The series had won multiple awards and was now used in tourism management courses worldwide. Mark Reynolds, overseeing his last ceremony before retirement, shared remarkable statistics. Disruptive incidents at heritage sites have decreased by 98% worldwide. But more importantly, visitor satisfaction has increased by 85%. People aren't just behaving better, they're understanding better. Judge Blackwood attended the ceremony to announce the establishment of the International Heritage Protection Court, a specialized legal body dedicated to preserving cultural sites worldwide. The court's founding principles were directly inspired by her verdict in the Windsor case. The Education Center had expanded into a comprehensive research facility studying the relationship between modern tourism and historical preservation. Will Mitchell headed the center's training division, developing new methods to balance accessibility with protection. Emma's original students, who had witnessed the incident, had grown into heritage protection professionals themselves. Many now led programs at historical sites worldwide, sharing their first-hand experience of how respect for tradition could transform tourism. The social media landscape had evolved beyond recognition. The trending hashtag #HeritageGuardian celebrated tourists who demonstrated exceptional respect at historical sites. Content creators competed to produce the most educational and respectful heritage tourism content. "We've created a new kind of influencer," Brandon explained. "One who influences people to protect and preserve, not disrupt and destroy." Oliver's junior guards had expanded into universities, creating a pipeline for future heritage protection professionals. The program now offered scholarships for students pursuing careers in cultural preservation. "These young people understand something profound," Sarah noted. "Protecting heritage isn't just about preserving the past, it's about securing our future." The ceremony featured a powerful moment when Will and Brandon together unveiled a new permanent installation, a heritage protection pledge wall where visitors could commit to respecting and preserving cultural sites. "This wall represents our shared commitment," Will announced. "Every signature is a promise to protect our heritage for future generations." As the sun set over Windsor Castle, the assembled crowd witnessed something unprecedented. The Queen's Guard performed a special ceremonial drill, incorporating elements suggested by Oliver's Junior Guards program, a perfect blend of tradition and innovation. 5 years ago, this story began with disrespect, Will concluded. Today, it continues with understanding, preservation, and hope for the future. Want to be part of this continuing story of transformation? Hit subscribe and the notification bell to join our community of heritage guardians. Share your own stories of respectful tourism in the comments below. Remember, every visitor has the power to protect history. Until next time. As Windsor Castle prepared for nightfall, the legacy of one tourist's mistake continued to inspire positive change worldwide. The sword that Brandon had tried to steal now symbolized something far more powerful, the strength of tradition when protected by understanding and respect. On the 6th anniversary of the Windsor incident, a remarkable gathering took place that would demonstrate just how far the ripple effects of that fateful day had spread. The Global Heritage Summit, hosted in the expanded International Tourist Education Center at Windsor Castle, brought together representatives from every UNESCO World Heritage Site worldwide. The event marked the launch of the Heritage Guardians 2030 initiative, a comprehensive plan to further revolutionize cultural site preservation. Will Mitchell, now serving on the UNESCO World Heritage Committee, opened the summit with a powerful reflection. 6 years ago, on these very grounds, we witnessed how a single moment could catalyze global change. Today, we gather not to dwell on past incidents, but to shape the future of heritage protection. Emma Clark's Heritage Guardians program had evolved into a United Nations-backed educational framework. Schools in 157 countries had integrated her curriculum, creating a global network of young heritage protectors. What started as a response to a crisis has become a movement, Emma explained to the assembled delegates. Today's children don't just visit historical sites. They understand their role in preserving them for future generations. David Wilson's photographic work had expanded into a traveling exhibition called Guardians of Time, showcasing how tourist behavior at heritage sites had transformed worldwide. His latest images captured something remarkable: tourists spontaneously intervening to prevent disruptive behavior at historical sites. Lisa Turner, whose viral video had sparked the initial change, now headed the International Heritage Media Archive. "We're not just documenting history," she explained. "We're teaching future generations how to protect it." Sarah Cooper and Oliver had transformed the Junior Guards into a global youth leadership program. Oliver, now 13, addressed the summit with remarkable poise about the importance of engaging young people in heritage protection. "Young people don't want to just learn about history," Oliver stated. "They want to be part of preserving it. When we give them that opportunity, amazing things happen." Brandon Wright, standing beside Will during the opening ceremony, reflected on his personal transformation. 6 years ago, I saw tradition as something to challenge. Today, I understand it's something to cherish and protect. Derek Anderson premiered his latest documentary, The Ripple Effect, tracking how the Windsor incident had influenced heritage protection policies worldwide. The film featured interviews with tourists who had changed their behavior after learning about the incident. Mark Reynolds, though retired, returned as a special advisor to the summit. "What we've achieved goes beyond security," he noted. "We've created a culture of respect that protects these sites more effectively than any barrier." Judge Blackwood's International Heritage Protection Court had successfully prosecuted its first cases, establishing global precedents for protecting cultural sites. "The law now recognizes that attacking heritage is attacking our shared human story," she explained. The Education Center unveiled its latest innovation, a worldwide network of heritage protection training facilities, each adapted to local cultural contexts while maintaining global standards. Emma's former students, who had witnessed the original incident, now led workshops at the summit, sharing their perspectives on how that moment had shaped their understanding of cultural preservation. The social media landscape continued to evolve, with platforms now featuring dedicated heritage protection verification badges for content creators who consistently promoted respectful tourism. "We've turned social media from a potential threat to heritage sites into one of their strongest protections," Brandon explained during a panel discussion. Oliver's Junior Guards program had inspired similar youth initiatives at cultural sites worldwide. Young people in traditional dress now helped guide visitors at heritage sites from Petra to Angkor Wat. "When visitors see young people taking pride in their heritage," Sarah observed, "it changes how they approach these sites." The summit featured an unprecedented ceremony, the signing of the Global Heritage Protection Accord, a binding international agreement to standardize heritage site protection worldwide. Will and Brandon together presented the Accord's first principle: heritage sites are not attractions to be consumed, but treasures to be preserved. As the summit proceeded, tourists at Windsor Castle demonstrated the transformation in action. Visitors quietly observed traditions, maintained respectful distances, and even politely corrected those who strayed from guidelines. Want to be part of this continuing evolution in heritage protection? Subscribe now and hit that notification bell to stay updated on how tourist behavior at historical sites continues to transform. Share your thoughts below on how we can all contribute to preserving our shared heritage. Until next time, the legacy of the Windsor sword incident had grown far beyond a tourist's mistake. It had become a catalyst for reimagining how humanity interacts with its own history. Looking back 6 years later, it was clear that what could have been a simple security incident had instead sparked a global revolution in cultural preservation. The sword that Brandon had tried to steal now symbolized something far more valuable: the power of understanding to protect our shared heritage. The gathered delegates at the summit represented not just their individual sites, but a shared commitment to preserving history through education, understanding, and respect. As the sun set over Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the historic grounds, the transformative power of that fateful day continued to ripple outward, touching lives and changing perspectives around the world. 7 years after the Windsor Castle incident, a special ceremony marked the closing chapter of this remarkable story, but opened the door to an even more extraordinary future. Windsor Castle hosted the inaugural World Heritage Legacy Awards, celebrating individuals who had transformed how humanity preserves its cultural heritage. The event coincided with the installation of a permanent memorial, marking how one tourist's mistake had revolutionized global tourism. Will Mitchell, now retiring from his position as Global Heritage Protection Ambassador, stood in his ceremonial uniform one last time. 7 years ago, I was simply doing my duty, he addressed the gathered dignitaries. Today, we all share that duty to protect our heritage. Emma Clark's Heritage Guardians program had become the global standard for cultural education. Her methodology had been adopted by the United Nations as a cornerstone of sustainable tourism development. What began as a lesson about respect has become a blueprint for global understanding, Emma explained during her keynote speech. Every child who completes this program becomes a guardian of our shared history. David Wilson's final photographic collection, 7 Years of Change, captured the remarkable transformation in tourist behavior worldwide. His images showed visitors spontaneously forming protective circles around historical artifacts and respectfully guiding others in proper site etiquette. Lisa Turner's viral video had been permanently enshrined in the British Museum's new wing, dedicated to digital heritage preservation. Sometimes the most important historical moments are captured by chance, she reflected. But their impact is anything but accidental. Sarah Cooper and Oliver had transformed the Junior Guards into an international youth leadership academy. Oliver, now 14, had become the youngest ever UNESCO Youth Ambassador for Cultural Heritage. We didn't just change how people visit historical sites, Oliver explained to the assembled crowd. We changed how they connect with history itself. Brandon Wright, standing beside Will during the ceremony, had become a respected figure in heritage preservation. His journey from would-be thief to protector of tradition had inspired millions. 7 years ago, I thought tradition was just for show, Brandon admitted. Now I understand that traditions are the threads that connect past, present, and future. The ceremony featured a powerful moment: the unveiling of the Guardian's Legacy Monument. The installation featured the ceremonial sword that Brandon had attempted to steal, now permanently displayed alongside photographs documenting the transformation it had inspired. As the sun set on Windsor Castle for the final segment of this story, the gathered crowd witnessed something unprecedented. Tourists from around the world, many wearing Heritage Guardian badges, stood in respectful silence as Will Mitchell performed his final ceremonial guard duty. Want more inspiring stories of transformation? Click on the videos appearing on your screen right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to never miss our latest uploads. Share your thoughts in the comments below about how this story has changed your perspective on historical sites. Up next, we've got 2 more incredible stories that will leave you speechless. Just click the thumbnails on your screen to continue this journey of discovery. Thank you for being part of this remarkable story of redemption, respect, and the power of positive change. Until next time, remember, every visitor has the power to become a guardian of history. This story teaches us that one moment can change everything, not just for one person or place, but for how humanity preserves its shared heritage. From a tourist's mistake came a global movement that continues to inspire respectful tourism worldwide. Remember to like, subscribe, and click those recommended videos to keep the inspiration flowing. Your next amazing story is just one click away.